Welcome to the Roy Morgan Weekly Update. Well, what a weekend, what a federal election, and what an incredible result. The nation entered this election with unprecedented levels of distrust in government, politicians, and government services. And we saw a change in government and a change probably in the entire political landscape. The ALP looks set to have won a narrow majority, although there are still seats to be counted and that remain in doubt as to their final result. Nevertheless, Anthony Albanese has been sworn in as Australia's 31st Prime Minister and has already jetted off to Japan for a meeting of the Quad. Current counting shows the ALP on 52.2% of the two-party preferred vote. That's up 3.7 since the 2019 election, compared to the LNP coalition on 47.8%. Now, the final Roy Morgan poll predicted a slightly larger swing to the ALP. We had ALP 53 to LNP 47, but the final result looks to be well within 1 percentage point. Now, for the poll watchers, those people who look at these polls very, very closely, number one, Roy Morgan accurately predicted a Labor win and that it could be days before it would be known whether it was an outright win or a minority government. That's true. Number two, Roy Morgan underestimated Clive Palmer's UAP, United Australia Party vote, and the Liberal vote. Now, these polls were done by telephone, and in telephone surveys, there's always a bias to the party that people think will win, a sort of social desirability bias, and a bias against the party that's not popular, like the UAP, and in this case, Scott Morrison's Liberal Party. In the 1950s, the DLP was underestimated until Roy Morgan used a face-to-face secret ballot where respondents could actually write on this ballot paper how they were going to vote and pop it in the ballot box. That was the only way that we were able to get respondents to honestly say who they were going to vote for when their choice was an unpopular one. So Roy Morgan eagerly looks forward to getting back to face-to-face interviewing after COVID. This was a unique election in many ways, but importantly, the large percentage voting for non-major parties. So you had basically the Labor Party on 32.8, the LNP 35.8, and 31.4 for other parties, almost a three-way race. And amazingly, both major parties lost support at the federal election, though the LNP lost far more support. And support increased more than 6 percentage points for the other parties and independents. Not since 1906 have we seen both major parties with primary votes less than 40%. So it really is extraordinary. So today the ALP is on the verge of a majority. It's on the verge of winning a majority with 74 seats as counting is today, an increase of 6 seats from the 2019 federal election. The LNP is on only 59 seats, that's down 18 seats. The big story though, as I said before, is the independents who are sitting on 10 seats, an increase of 7 seats since 2019. The Greens are on 2, which is up 1 seat. Both Bob Katter and Rebecca Sharkey have retained their seats. So the LNP lost seats all around Australia, but the big losses were in New South Wales, where they lost 6 seats, Western Australia, 5 seats, and Victoria, 4 seats, a total of 15 seats there. And in the rest of Australia, the coalition only lost 2 seats in Queensland and 1 in South Australia. Now, the ALP won seats in 4 states. The big wins were in Western Australia, 4 seats on the back of a two-party preferred swing to the ALP of over 11%. The ALP also won 3 seats in New South Wales, 2 in Victoria, and 1 seat in South Australia. So I have to say, counting continues. Now, last week at Roy Morgan, we raised the issue or the question of how the Teal independents would fare. We mentioned 6 seats in Sydney and Melbourne, inner Sydney and inner Melbourne. The Liberals ended up losing all 6 seats, and they also lost 1 seat in Western Australia. So there are now 7 Teal independents in Parliament, up from only 1 after the 2019 federal election. These Teal independents won 4 seats in Sydney, Michele, North Sydney, Wentworth, and they retained Warringah. They won 2 seats in Melbourne, Goldstein and Kooyong, and 1 seat in Perth, that's Curtin. And the biggest scalp of the night was the prospective future Liberal Party leader and treasurer, Josh Frydenberg. Frydenberg's loss means that Peter Dutton looks set to be the new Liberal leader in opposition. The women's vote. The danger of ignoring half the population was obvious from the Morgan polls throughout this election. As we pointed out continually during the year, women swung heavily away from the coalition after the allegations of former staffer Brittany Higgins were made public in 2021. They never really recovered. And the cost of living entered this election as an issue way too late. It's always the biggest issue. Whenever Roy Morgan asks people what is the biggest issue facing them, what's the biggest issue that leaders should deal with, the cost of living is always at the top. And yet that was not really dealt with early in the campaign. The issue of the environment and corruption were inadequately understood. It really seems as if each of the major parties, was simply benchmarking against the other. And of course, what that does, it leaves the voters to choose between the best of a bad bunch. And then, of course, came Teal, capturing the imagination, the optimism, and the votes of a large portion of the population as they dealt with these issues head on. So the final Roy Morgan poll of the campaign showed women supporting the ALP 55 to LNP 45%, a huge difference on a two-party preferred basis. And the swing away from the coalition in these formerly blue ribbon Liberal seats swept many Liberals out of office and has potentially changed the electoral landscape in Australia for a generation or maybe forever. The support of women and progressive men for the Teal independents in these key seats may well herald the birth of a new political party, although at this stage the newly elected Teals are vowing to remain as independents. There are likely to be many more Teal candidates at future elections, so we'll be looking out at the upcoming Victorian election and the New South Wales state elections, as well as the 2025 federal election. Who even wants to think about that? So looking forward, what's the first big challenge for the new government? Economic issues? The latest Roy Morgan unemployment figure is now 9.7%. And there are further 8.4% underemployed, a total of more than 2.6 million Australians unemployed or underemployed without as much work as they would like. So that's an important number, a big number, and we know the majority of people believe these numbers, that unemployment is at this rate, rather than the very low number that the ABS presents and that the politicians keep talking about, something around 4%. People don't believe it. In addition, the other issues are rising inflation and the prospect of further interest rates and further increases in those interest rates. The most visible sign of inflation continues to be petrol prices, and they've shot up in the last couple of weeks, back to over $2 a litre, near almost up to the record high that we saw in mid-March. So keep a watch on consumer confidence, unemployment, real unemployment, inflation, petrol prices, interest rates, and critically, inflation expectations. What people expect inflation is going to be. Because really, we've always said consumer confidence is more important than what really happens in the economy, because it's how people respond to that. And inflation expectations is critical. It will drive spending or saving or fear or rushing out and doing things. So keep a watch on these things. So these economic challenges or numbers are likely to define the first year of the Albanese government and will be a really big factor in determining whether the new Prime Minister can enjoy an extended honeymoon in the job. Thank you for listening. I look forward to joining you again next week.